Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some breaking news out of San Francisco today, where Coaster Nation has just reported that California's Great America has filed for a 236-foot ride to be placed inside its park, most likely for the 2020 season. Now, I think a lot of people are jumping right to a hypercoaster possibly. That if you remember a few years ago, California's Great America filed with shareholders their plans for the future. In there was what we got, Railblazer, that you could read it and it could be interpreted as maybe one of those spots that they talked about was for Railblazer. They also talked about installing a major roller coaster. Now, they did say it was going to be 245 feet because I guess the airline restriction or the airspace restriction for Kaga is 250 feet. But now we get this report out there that this is going to be 236 feet. According to the report, also, the structure itself is going to be 210 feet. The site elevation is 26 feet, which then gives us the total height of 236 feet. So, so the structure itself. Now, it's my belief that Kaga's pretty flat. So unless you dig out some areas,
yeah, it is relatively flat. Relatively speaking, it's interesting because Great America has a little bit of an interesting location because it's in Santa Clara there, right, in the Silicon Valley. You've got like Google and Yahoo and eBay and all these, high-tech companies there along Great America Parkway. It's in Santa Clara, which is like between San Francisco and like San Jose area. It's a little bit closer to the San Jose area. So you've got multiple different airports to consider here. At some point, you've also got Oakland there on the other side of San Francisco. So you've got multiple entities that you're probably worried about. But San Jose is the major airport nearby, as it says in the Coaster Nation article. So it's in close proximity to the final approach path for planes landing at the San Jose airport. So this is kind of the one that they're most concerned about. It's curious to me because they're talking about. You and I were discussing this a little bit offline, how it says the construction would take place between March 1st and December 31st, and how I don't know if that considers like electrical and controls work, and I'm assuming that wouldn't include testing because that's, I guess, no longer construction. So that would imply that the structure itself would be done by the end of 2019, which I guess would make sense if you're doing controls work and electrical work and utilities work, in the winter leading up to what I would expect would be a March opening, as the park does tend to open in the mid-March time frame. So if they wanted it opening for opening day, then I would think that might make some sense. But I would have to assume then that utilities and electrical work and whatnot is not included in that, which would make sense from an FAA standpoint that doesn't need to be filed then, because that doesn't include the high up work of the actual structure. Because once the structure's there, you can kind of do whatever you want with it, I think. This is interesting. Because I think a lot of people are planning trips to Great America this year in Northern California. Both of us are folks who were considering that trip. You and I were talking, had this been for 2019, it might be worth it to just save it and wait a year. The fact that this looks like it may be leaning towards being a 2020 attraction, for me, it's a bit more interesting because then I'd have to wait 2 more years after having not been there since 2014. So that'd be 6 years. Do I go and then go again in 2 years? I don't know. Because I haven't ridden Joker at Discovery Kingdom either. But the other thing that's interesting here, and you and I couldn't actually find this documentation anywhere. This is a screen grab from what is supposedly the FAA website. You and I could not find. We went and searched for this ourselves. So I guess I'm not saying this is fake. I'm not saying this is fake news, Coaster Nation.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we couldn't find it. So I mean, take anything you see here with a grain of salt, but it does seem to be pretty legit. It does seem as if it was filed in late 2017, so
it does look exactly like the Railblazer one did too.
Yes.
That we know the Railblazer one. A lot of people learned of that from this type of thing as well. So
Yes.
It does look like that as well. I think the other interesting thing to point, though, is that, there is the off chance that this is not a hypercoaster, because in those plans, they also said that, and Coaster Nation posted those plans as well, that they said that they'd be building a Windseeker type ride as well that would be about 230 feet. So the reason why I brought up that plan initially is they said that, the hypercoaster is going to be 245, but now it's 236 according to this. Is this a Windseeker? When you look at the location, because they do give you a latitude and longitude on there, when you look at the location, I guess you could fit a hypercoaster in there. I don't think it's going to be easy to do. You're going to have to remove a whole lot of stuff, buildings, go-karts, maybe some flat rides. The location does seem like it might be conducive more to a Windseeker,
Now,
towards the middle of the park, away from the observation tower too, because you can't put the Windseeker right next to the observation tower up front. So I would temper expectations. I'm hoping for a hypercoaster. Obviously, I think that park would do well to get a hypercoaster, but I think people also need to temper expectations and say, hey, what else is going on in 2020? There's a big anniversary year. So
yeah.
we're saying that Kaga is going to get a hypercoaster, and Cedar Point. I've been saying wood coaster on the beach for a while now, and that would fit because we know that Cedar Fair has put in major roller coasters and wood coasters in the same year. You go back to 2009 with Diamondback and Prowler, Gold Keep or Gatekeeper and Gold Striker.
Yeah, Goldkeeper and Gate Striker, the two great roller coasters. I have not ridden those, but
so we see a lot of evidence of that. The only evidence we see of two major steel coasters going in is really I-305 and I-232 going in at Carowinds and Kings Dominion the same year. And I personally think that was more of an issue of they needed to put those. They had just purchased those properties. They needed to do something big to put them on the map. And thus they did.
Now here's an interesting thing. Now I want you to look at this filing. I want you to expand this image here and look at a few things. Just a second, because we should do some compare and contrast here from these two filings. I think that would be useful to do here. So open up. I'm going to open them up side by side, and I'm going to point out just a few differences. So we looked at the construction, and it says March 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. So that's, a 9-month span, 10 months really. If you look at the Railblazer one, it says October 1st, 2017 to March 31st, 2018. So a much shorter span. So this would maybe imply that it is going to be a larger structure that will take longer to complete.
That would also mean that Railblazer is not opening for opening day, because opening day this year is March 24th.
It would seem to suggest that if they anticipated issues, then they wouldn't have to refile.
And if I recall correctly, I don't think Gold Striker opened on opening day.
I don't believe so. I
thought Gold Striker opened more towards Gatekeeper, maybe a little bit before, because I felt like Gold Striker ran a first rider auction, and I felt like I actually considered doing it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt it was more towards Gatekeeper, though. This is a fact, so we don't have to speculate. So you can keep talking. I'll research this.
Yeah. So they call this. So the structure type is both other without antenna. So that's fine. I'm just looking for a few other.
So to piggyback on what I said, they said that they had a soft opening of Gold Striker on April 30th, then the official opening date was a full month later, May 31st.
That sounds right, because I remember seeing it towards the end of April that it opened.
Yeah, so that's significantly different than both Railblazer and what is being proposed here.
So then in the description of the proposal for Railblazer, it said construct permanent amusement structure that is 100 feet above ground level. And then it's much vaguer on this new one. It just says new steel structure.
Yeah.
It's very vague. I'm just looking for any other big changes. I mean, for the most part, it's the same. We don't really get a whole lot outside of that. Current marking / lighting, the Railblazer one said none. This one says not applicable proposed structure. So I don't know what the significance of a couple of those subtle differences are. It does. I think what we can take away from this is it's going to be 210 feet above the ground level.
Yeah.
And it's going to take much longer to build than Railblazer. I think those are the two things that we can somewhat definitively take away from this. So maybe that's an argument against a Windseeker style ride, but the location might say otherwise. So I'm curious to see how things are going to develop here with this.
Well, yeah, because you look at a ride like Mako that everyone's been raving about, as we've seen on the Thrilling 32, and that's only 200 feet tall. So maybe going 10 extra feet, they're gonna do something. I don't know. I think it's way too early at this point. I'm kind of surprised that this information has leaked, because Cedar Fair likes to keep things under wraps, and we're talking about 2 years from now at this point. When we're talking about a huge season for California already, I find it strange that they would have filed this so early. I don't know how soon you need to do it, but Railblazer was just filed, correct? If you look at that document, is it because it wasn't impacting the airspace as much?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's a real good question. But I think at the end of the day, I think California's Great America needs a hypercoaster. Just looking at their lineup in general, I think it would do well to have a hypercoaster. And B&M, and that's the other question. I think a lot of people are just assuming B&M, but what if it's not B&M? What if it's Mac? Because Mac's not building a lot. They're building Time Traveler down at Silver Dollar City. I think we can kind of discount Vekoma. I've heard through people that Vekoma's kind of booked up.
Well, and let's keep in mind that this doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a hypercoaster in the traditional sense either. Yeah. We could be looking at like an accelerator type ride with maybe more to it. We could be looking at, we're looking at like an Intamin Blitz style coaster, maybe not Intamin specifically, but maybe we're looking at something more along those lines. It would seem odd to me. I don't know. I think it would be really cool if we got a launch coaster that was a little bit different, that had some nice big elements. I don't know where in the park those elements go, because Six Flags Over Georgia did a really nice job of sticking Goliath in the middle of the park and having it go out over stuff. Yeah. That doesn't go very close to the ground almost at all. It goes over Georgia Scorcher multiple times. It goes over some other rides. It goes over some midways. It goes over the access road into the parking lot. So we've seen examples of B&M hypercoasters kind of going over things before. So I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on this. I think typically we start to see like blueprints next. Maybe we'll see some leaked blueprints in the coming months and get an idea for what we're talking layout wise. Then maybe we can narrow some other stuff down.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an interesting development here. Almost surprising as well to me that this has come out so early. But like we said, we'll keep you updated here on what's going on. As always, thanks for joining us here on COASTER-net Update. I'm of course Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois,
and Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, right on, Ride Warriors.
See you guys.